Hey guys, welcome to the SaaS Sessions podcast. I believe many of us are working remotely now because of COVID, and many will still be working remotely until this whole situation goes out. But something interesting about our guest today is that she's been working remotely before it was cool, right? So Meera Sapra is our guest, and she joined Zoho in 2008 as her first remote employee, and she's been working remotely for the past 12 years now. Now, Meera, I'm not trying to make you feel old, but just to paint a picture, in 2008 when you started working for Zoho, I was in my 8th standard. And now I got this wonderful opportunity to connect with you on this podcast. So such a pleasure to have you on the show, Meera.
Thanks, Sunil. The pleasure is all mine. And that certainly does make me feel old, but yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. So, can you tell us more about yourself and, just traveling back to 2008, first remote employee at Zoho.
Hmm.
Zoho was not called Zoho back then, I guess it was called something else.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and you started working remotely for them. The remote is now cool, but that time I'm sure it definitely was not cool, or it was not common more than it was not
Definitely
cool.
not.
Yeah. So how was that experience for you? Like, if you want to share, how did that transition happen from like you quitting your job and then working for a company which is like now one of the largest startups in India?
Right. Yeah. So I guess, like you said, it was definitely not cool. In fact, it was unheard of. So when I found this opportunity and I found it over the internet, it was also not that common to find opportunities over the internet. Of course, there were things like job portals and all online job portals, but like a company hiring you online on the basis of maybe a conversation they've only had with you online was also uncommon at that time, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we had like I had a series of conversations and I was interested in this role, and obviously I had no experience of working in the whole tech space, right? So it was all new to me and exciting for me, and that is the reason I want to take the plunge and maybe learn something new. But I had like a good conventional job where I was doing decently well, and because I was taking up something that was going to be remote, the kind of reactions I got from everybody who heard about that, they were like, you must be crazy to do this,
Mm-hmm.
and of course, like you said, no one had heard of Zoho back then. And it wasn't called Zoho even, it was called AdventNet. The company was called AdventNet back then.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, when I said I'm going to be working for this company, I live in Delhi, the company is based in Chennai, and it's going to be a remote arrangement. Everybody was like, you crazy, and my family also said that, what if you don't even get paid? You're going to
Yeah.
regret doing this. So I guess for me it was more like I'm okay living with the regret of something going wrong, rather
Mm-hmm.
than living with the regret that I didn't take that chance, right? Because I think we should take the chances. And I mean, looking back, this is one chance that I'm very glad that I took.
That's really amazing. I mean, I could imagine doing something which is not common and going out of the way and doing that. You face a lot of oppositions from your peers, your network, your family, friends, everyone. But then, once it starts and once it starts working out for you and then everything falls into place, then it feels right. I'm really excited to dive deeper into how did you start working remotely, because at that time I believe there were no tools which would enable you to work remotely as well. Like now we have
Right.
like tons of platforms, tools, and like devices and everything which is available, um, which can enable you to work remotely in an hour. Like in one
Right.
hour you can go from complete non-remote to a remote work environment for
Yeah,
yourself.
yeah, yeah.
So how did you start working remotely for Zoho? Like how was the first few weeks like, and how were you onboarded? And then how did you start working? How did you start
Mhm.
like, collaborating with the other teams and stuff?
Yeah. So the good thing is I was working with, my role was specific to working with one particular team, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that was actually a good way to start working remotely at a time when, this was not the norm at all. So that was good. And even now, I think that how successful you are at working remotely largely depends on the culture of a team, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or a company, of course. But even within a large company, different teams have their own sort of like micro cultures, which may vary a little from the overall larger culture in the
Mm-hmm.
organization. So I think the first team that I happened to work with, they had a very good culture where they already had a habit of like documenting things, and so that
Mm-hmm.
somebody who's not there also gets a chance to sort of get an idea of what's happening, what people are thinking, what people are doing, what they're
Mm-hmm.
working on, right? So that is something that at least at that time I would say was rare to find, and I was lucky that I found it. Otherwise it would have been difficult to work remotely. In terms of tools, of course it was very limiting because like you said, there weren't too many tools at that time which were designed for remote working, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, at Zoho now, of course, we have the entire stack of tools that help teams work remotely. But even back then, we had all of our tools that we had back then were more like, online work. It was about working online, right? We even
Mm-hmm.
had a tagline at that time. The Zoho tagline was work online at that time.
Got
So
it.
it was about working online, and we already did have some tools in place. Obviously, compared to what we have now, that was primitive, but we already have had some tools in place which enabled us to have that interaction even though I was remote. But I would
Yeah.
say the biggest thing was the culture of the team. The first team that I worked with, they had a very, I can't say remote friendly culture because no remote existed at that time, but
Right.
just because they were like communicative as a team, they would like write things down, they would have
Mm-hmm.
interactions, right? And it's not like each one is working on their own thing. We would have
Mm-hmm.
frequent interactions. So that is something that I felt really helped me. That was definitely there. But yeah, having said that, I think I did not have as many like face to face interactions as in
Mm-hmm.
traveling and going down and meeting the team at that time,
Mm-hmm.
because this was very new to me. So I was not sure, and of course to the company as well, so we were not sure how things would go.
Right.
So I didn't do, in fact, even when I got hired, I didn't have to like go down to do have like an orientation or get my
Yeah.
offer letter or anything like that. I just straight up started working, right? So
Mm.
so that was a bit, I would say, like, now things don't happen like that. There's always
Yeah.
like some orientation or something. So
Totally.
in a way it was definitely good. I started working, and then I think 2 months after, like, yeah, a couple of months after I'd started working, we made the decision to let me just go down there physically, like take a flight and go down there and meet the team.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I did. I took a day trip and I went and I met the team, and I'm like, oh, so these are the people I'm working with. Cool, that's
Nice.
nice.
That's really amazing. I mean, Zoho is definitely futuristic in that way. If they didn't have you, like, fly you down to their office
Right.
before you joined, right? And that's really
Absolutely.
amazing, right? So I'm sure you would have faced a lot of challenges in remote work, right? Like it might be challenges with managing your day-to-day the task, or it might be
Hmm.
collaborating with your team. It might be at those times not a lot of collaboration softwares are available, so you have to like do
Right.
everything over email. And some days, like when you have work overflowing for you, it becomes you're focusing on some things and some things are left out. So different kinds of challenges that you and your team would have faced with
Right.
you working remotely, right? Because everyone is there and
Hmm.
you sort of are not there, right? So what
Right.
was those challenges that you faced, and then how did you overcome those? And I'm
Hmm.
sure like however you overcame those challenges, those would be like sort of bylaws that would be written in the Zoho, let's say, handbook for working remotely now. Because now Zoho
Hmm.
has like a few people who have been working remotely for them for the past
Yeah.
like 12 years now. So they have the most experience in terms of remote work, right?
Right.
So that would have helped create a remote kind of culture in Zoho too. So
Yes.
yeah, can you tell us some challenges that you faced?
Sure. So I think one of the biggest personal challenges that I faced was that there was this, at least initially, there was this FOMO, like, fear of missing
Mm-hmm.
out, that, okay, the team is there and I don't know what's happening, even though they were like very, very communicative, to give them credit, especially now when
Right.
I look back, now when I have worked remotely for so many years, I can say that my first team was like really communicative, and
Mm-hmm.
they were very good at keeping me in the loop all the time. So that is something that I think I must appreciate, that helped me. But even then, there was this always this nagging feeling in my head that, okay, everybody's there, maybe they have access to some information that I don't, so maybe
Mm-hmm.
I'm losing out on some way, or that will maybe affect my career in the long run or something. So there was this nagging thing at the back of my head all the time, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I think it only took time and for me to be able to do good work to prove that, yeah, it's only work that matters. And I think that over all these years, I have discovered that that is the most beautiful thing about working remotely, right? That the focus is only on your work. No one
Mm-hmm.
sees what time you're coming, what time you're leaving, who are you talking to, what are you doing. The focus is on the quality of your work, right? So that
Right.
was, I would say really very liberating for me, that the only thing you focus on is your work, and also you can create the best environment for yourself to focus, right? You don't have any distractions, you don't have any commute, you're not like already exhausted from being in, being through traffic. By the time you get to office, you're like half your energy sapped. So I felt I could like do my best work, and somehow I was able to put this thing to rest in my mind, that it's okay if I'm not there. I can compensate by doing good work, because I am in my zone, I'm in my
Mm-hmm.
space. Of course my team is keeping me clued in, but I can do really good work and sort of like make up for not being there physically. I sort of felt that I had to do extra because I was not there.
Right.
Now that's not the case when people or companies hire remotely, and now when everybody's working remotely during the pandemic. It's not like companies expect that, oh, people are remote, so they should be working more than they did in the office, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
not that. But at that time, at least I felt that I should be working more because I am remote, because I have to somehow make up for not being physically present. So that
Right.
was something that kind of, it was something I didn't struggle with that, because I was really enjoying the work that I
Mm-hmm.
did, and I still do that. But especially like the first role that I had when I joined, I really enjoyed the work that I did, because I was learning something completely new. So to me,
Mm-hmm.
it didn't feel like, I mean, honestly, I looking back, I probably put in like 12 hours, 16-hour days, work days, and I was like very willingly, very happily doing that, because I was just, for me, it was just enjoying doing what I'm doing, and I didn't look at it as work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I even remember my manager telling me that, that you should, now take a break. You've been at this all day. How
Mm-hmm.
much are you going to work? And that you're very fast. You do a lot of work in very less time. But I think that was because I was trying to make use of the opportunity that was available to me, that I have this time and I'm enjoying what I'm learning, so why not? So I didn't look at it as, oh, I should just work for 8 hours and then log off. I didn't look at it as like a 9 to 5 job.
Got it. And then having said this, it's really also important to, like, when you're working from home, like your workplace is your living place or your living place is your workplace. So it's really important to have a work-life balance as well, right? So you have
Right.
to like make the cut, right? That you have to decide on times that, hey, you're going to be working from like, from 8 to 5, and
Hmm.
at that time you're constantly working. But then that really does not happen at home, because there are a lot of things that are out of your control that can come and disrupt that particular flow that you have built for yourself. But what are some tips that you have that you can share, like from 12 years of your experience, that to managing your work and personal life for people who are currently working from home? Like, personally saying, it happens with me. Like, I decide I'll start
Hmm.
at, like, let's say
Hmm.
11 a.m. or 12 p.m. and I'll stop at, like, 8 9. But then
Hmm.
some things happen and I have to go out of my room for having lunch with my family, and then the lunch
Right.
takes 1 hour of my
Yeah.
time. So then that kind of disrupts the whole schedule for the entire day then, right?
Right.
So how do
Right.
you avoid getting into those situations, and how can you like some tips that you can share to manage your, like, personal and work life at when you're
Hmm.
at home and in this environment?
Okay, so honestly, this is something that I struggled with a lot, especially during
Hmm.
the early years. And I
Hmm.
would say that I was erring more on the side of, like maybe like having less personal time and doing more work. But that's only because I did not think of the work as work. I was enjoying it and I was learning, right? So
Hmm.
maybe my balance was disrupted, but I didn't mind that because I was just enjoying it. And if you
Right.
enjoy what you do, you can't really call it work, right? So for me,
Hmm.
it was like that. But yeah, after a few years, I started realizing that I should make time to learn other things, do other things that I enjoy. And you need to balance out time, spend time with other people, with family. You can't just be glued to a screen, right? Especially when you're
Hmm.
working remotely. So if
Right.
you're just going to be glued to a screen, it's not good for your overall health. So I definitely have been able to better balance it now over the last few years, and that's come from years of working remotely. One thing I've realized is that you can't have very clear boundaries. Like, I can't say that this is my work and this is my, this is my
Hmm.
personal time. It's just not possible, because our our work and life are so integrated now that,
Right.
like, it's not about just working from home. Even if, let's say, you're at the office and you just remember that, oh, I forgot to order groceries, right? So what are you
Hmm.
going to do? That, oh, I'm going to go home and then order because right now I'm working? No, it's
Hmm.
fine. You can order your groceries and then carry on with your work, because that will enable you to eat your meal on time at home because you have the groceries to cook it, and will enable you to go to work on time the next day, right? So our work and
Yeah.
life is integrated. Very often we try to, strike like a very perfect balance, or like have very clear divisions, but that doesn't exist. The idea
Hmm.
is to integrate it in a way that you're happy with that integration, right?
Right.
You have to be happy with that integration. You have to be able to do your best work and also live your best life, right? Be happy with
Hmm.
the life you're living, and the work is just a part of the life. So I would say that that is key. And looking for a very very rigid thing, like, okay, no, I have to these hours is when I'm working, and these hours is when I'm going to focus on other stuff. It doesn't
Hmm.
happen. So I would say, like, take your lunch break, enjoy it, right? But the rest of
Hmm.
the hours, try to make sure that, okay, you are focusing on work, or at least doing the work that you enjoy,
Right.
right? So but having said that, there are going to be things that sort of like compete for your attention and time,
Hmm.
and that can be work or life, and you have to basically like prioritize. One thing that has really helped me is turning off notifications. So when I want to like focus on something, I usually I keep my notifications turned off by default. I don't have notifications turned on. But when I want to focus on something, I actually put my phone on do not disturb mode. Okay. And I work, at least with my team, I work more in a way that's asynchronous. So it's not like everybody's real time and pinging each other and asking questions. So we actually schedule time for having face to face interactions, or like a video chat, or like even like just sit and brainstorm on something. So we schedule time for those interactive sessions, and we
Hmm.
schedule for the rest of the time is like unscheduled, and there's a lot of time to focus and think. Because I think for most of us, the work that we do, a majority of our work it relies on the ability to focus, think, create, right? for
Hmm.
for, for almost everybody. so
Got it.
so you don't want to, you don't want to be like constantly, you don't want your attention to be constantly bombarded with notifications and pings, and this becomes very common when you're working from home. So I think that's a good way to make the most of the hours that you have when you are at work.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And then to support all of this, right? Like, what can companies do so
Mm-hmm.
that they can support these employees? Because many companies now they are experiencing a first time remote culture, right? They
Right.
were not allowing uh, remote employees before, but now they are forced to, right? So this is something that they didn't choose willingly, but now they have to
Exactly.
do it because there's no other option. So now
Right.
for those companies, right? Like how can, or for even companies who allowed remote working before,
Hmm.
according to you, like what can companies do so that they can also help their employees to work remotely and still not feel like a lot of change or a lot of pressure on them.
Hmm. Right,
Mhm.
right, right. So I would say, I mean, that's a great question. And I would say that it is definitely something that has to do most importantly with culture, right?
Mhm.
And, whether you're at the office or you're remote, if a company has a culture where there is no trust or low trust in employees, where there's a lot of micromanagement, right?
Mhm.
It's this kind of a thing is not going to work, where even if you have to be remote for some time, or you have to consider being remote permanently, it's not going to work well. So I would say, like, it has to do a lot with the culture. And one of the key aspects is trusting your employees. If
Mhm.
your culture is a lot reliant on micromanagement, on things where employees have to like report back every day or every hour on what they're doing, then you're going to be needlessly creating pressure on your employees, right? So
Mhm.
I think one of the things that companies need to realize is that they have to trust their employees, right? So just like I said, that the only thing that matters is the work, right? even even
Mhm.
even for companies, if they look at it this way, that what matters is the work that people do. It doesn't matter how many hours they are online, because let's face it, I might take 6 hours to do something, and you may take 2 hours to do the same thing, and you may do a better job of it, right?
Right.
So the whole, when we had like people working from offices, there was the assumption that everybody has to spend 8 hours in an office, right? And it's almost like you're filling up some slots, right? And
Mhm.
we all know that in that 8 hours there would be some people who would be working all of those 8 hours. There's some people who would be working maybe only half those hours, they would be doing something else. But at least for those companies, it was more like, oh, people are at work, right? But
Mhm.
this mindset is what needs to change, because work is what you do, it's not where you go, right? So wherever you are, you can actually do good work if you want to do good work. And if you're capable of doing good work, you can do good work, right? But
Mm-hmm.
it's not tied to where you are. It's not tied to how many hours you spend doing it, because like I said, everybody has a different, someone might take more time for the same task, and
Mm-hmm.
they may either do a worse job of it or a better job of it. So I think companies need to realize that when people work remotely, or even if they don't, the focus should actually be on the work, the quality of the work that people do. And
Right.
once you focus on that, and then you send a signal to your employees as well that this is what matters to us, right? Then
Mm-hmm.
everybody focuses on doing their best work. But for that, of course, people have to feel that they are trusted by their managers, right? Often you have like managers who are like really insecure about, okay, what if my team is just chilling at home and not really working, right? Well,
Mm-hmm.
you'll find out. You don't have to like maybe like ping your team every hour on real time Slack or something, or click to check with them if they're really at work, right? You'll find out because you will see the work that they're doing, right? And that
Makes
work
sense.
should speak for itself, instead of you having to check with them. Or let's say, I've heard of companies where people have to, at the end of every day, they have to say what they did, or report what they did. And honestly, I don't believe in that culture, because what if today I just spent the time thinking about the work that I'm doing, and I didn't actually do any work, but tomorrow it
Mm-hmm.
enabled me to do better work, right?
Right.
So just defining this, or let's say if I start this thing in my team where I say everybody at the end of the day, talk about one good thing that you achieved at work, people will start making up those things for the sake of it, right? They'll start
Mm-hmm.
gaming that system. So don't do that. Let people work at their own pace, trust them,
Yeah.
and let them do their best work. And I think once people have everything that they need to do their work, right, all the resources that they need, and they have the freedom, and you trust them, they will do their best work. And if they
Totally.
don't, right, they will not get the opportunities that other people will get. So if you do your best work, and you do really good work, then you'll
Mm-hmm.
obviously get more opportunities, and be rewarded for it at work. And that in itself, like they say, like that in itself is a reward for you, that you've done some good work. And on the basis of that, the company is giving you, or your manager is giving you another opportunity to do something else, to learn something else, right? So let
Mm-hmm.
that be the incentive for people, rather than forcing and having too much structure. So that's definitely one thing.
Yeah.
That's a key thing. And then apart from that, I would say, having a culture of asynchronous communication. This is something that most people really struggle with, that you don't have to have all the conversations and discussions and meetings with your team in real time, right? That I think really kills a lot of creativity and focus and the ability to do good things, because you just want people to be with other people in a conversation all the time. That's not how everybody thinks, right? People
Mm-hmm.
need to think at their own pace, work at their own pace, and then maybe collect together for some reflection on what they are doing together as a team. But most people, when they work remotely especially, need to be like self driven, and work towards their own goals. And then that obviously is tied to like a team's goals. And again, team's goals are tied to like the organization's larger goals, right? So it
Mm-hmm.
has to be that you kind of try to encourage an asynchronous first culture, where you're not all the time like having real time discussions, or calling for meetings. And
True.
I at least try to tell my team to have enough unstructured time in their day.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe don't schedule more than one meeting in a day, or more than one call in a day, because then it's a huge demand on your time, on your attention, on your energy. Like, have enough unscheduled time, or I would say give your employees enough unscheduled time and space to do
Mm-hmm.
you know things that require thinking and creativity.
Got it. That's really interesting. I totally agree that companies and employees both, that they need to build trust with each other. And even if you are joining a team, you should be confident about your team members, that hey, they'll do it. And you just have to not, and micromanagement is definitely the worst thing to
Right,
have.
right. So
Right.
culture is key,
Mm-hmm.
and these are all aspects of the culture. And it's not like in an actual office. If you're working in an actual office, you're all co-located. The micromanagement and all of that is still there, right?
Yeah.
But because then a lot of employers and basically a lot of managers feel in control, that my team is right here where I can see what they're doing. They feel that they feel that they don't want to relinquish that control and have people work remotely. And that's why there's been so much of resistance to working remotely, right? But the moment they realize that whether people are in the office or whether they're at home, you've got to trust people. let them do their
Yep.
best work, give them the space
Mm-hmm.
and the freedom they need, and you will see the results. And if somebody is really not putting in good work, obviously as a manager you have to try and understand why that is happening, talk to them, and that may not have anything to do with the fact that they're working from home. That could happen
Yep.
even when they are at office, right? So you have to try and help them out, address that, rather than expecting that, oh, just because they're working from home they're not really working.
Yeah, totally. No, and everyone needs to understand that like all of us are in the same storm, but not in the same boat, right? Like you have
Exactly.
to understand like, what kind of boat the other person is in, and
Absolutely.
how the storm is affecting that boat, right? So
Right.
it's that I just heard about this analogy on some different podcast, and
Right.
I
No,
just
you
like
bring
liked
up
it.
a very valid point, because see, like even with like everyone working remotely, everybody
Hmm.
has a different environment at home, right?
Yeah,
Not everybody has the kind of maybe support and space that they have at home, right?
exactly.
So of
Hmm.
course, I mean, it's like, people may not have physical space, people may not have mental space, they may not have understanding family members, or
Hmm.
housemates, whoever lives with them, who give them that much of space to be able to do good work, right?
Yep.
So that is definitely something that is hard. And as a manager, like, you should, if you have a team and they're working remotely, you have to make it a point to try and understand if your team is able to work well remotely, each team member is able to work well, and if there's anything you can do to make it easier on them.
Hmm. Totally. I completely agree with that. So I think we have like reached the course for this episode, but let's move on to the lightning round section
Sure.
of the podcast. Yeah. So cool. Like I have like four questions for you. I
Right.
generally ask three, but then I have four for you.
Okay, cool.
Cool. So if you could go back in time, like your 2008, 2009, 2010 days, so what's something that you would do more, and what's something that you would do less of it?
I would say, I mean, honestly, it was all so perfect. I wouldn't really change anything, but maybe I would try to have more FaceTime with my team. Like, of course, there weren't as many tools available to have like more video meetings and stuff, but I would do that. I would probably make more trips. Like, so for the last few years, of course, not counting the pandemic at all. For the last few years, I would say for the last, at least for 7, 8 years, last 7, 8 years, I have made it a point to, travel and be with my team, like spend at least, I would say, once every quarter, I would go down and spend like 2, 3 weeks with them and work
Mm-hmm.
with them in person. And that's something that's really, really helped me, which I did not do in the early years, because like I was just figuring out how the whole
Mm-hmm.
remote work thing works. We were
Mm-hmm.
figuring it out, and I did not think of the possibility of making as many trips, right? So I think now, thinking back, I think those trips have really helped me, that I've been able to make before the whole pandemic started. Those trips really helped me, because I think, honestly, there is no substitute for the FaceTime interact, real in-person FaceTime interactions. And even for companies that choose to work remotely permanently, they should have something like, offsites or something where people get to meet in person, because that's what, like, I did. I made it a point to go meet my team, work physically with them for say 2, 3 weeks every quarter. And then when I go back, so it's kind of a recharge, like,
Mm-hmm.
you just have a different synergy when you go back and you work with them remotely again, because you understand each other so much better, right?
Yeah,
So I would say that is one thing that I missed out on doing. So I would say remote works, but if you balance it out with some in-person interaction, it works beautifully and it works even better, right? So that's something I
totally,
miss doing now in the pandemic. But yeah, I wish I had done more of it in my early years.
totally. And like, yeah, second question, like, what did your biggest professional failure teach you?
I actually don't think of anything as a big professional failure
Mm-hmm.
as such, but I would say, like, like it's not like a professional failure, but I would say more like a personal failure, when I felt that there were certain things that I wanted to do, which maybe I was not as persuasive in chasing those things, that yeah, maybe you should do it
Mm-hmm.
like that. And because other people were like, no, maybe, this is not a good idea, and I maybe let that be. So I think I should have been more persistent about those things, and I felt like later, when we did get around to doing them, they were actually better than what we did originally, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
think I think that's also like, I have a very strong gut feeling. So when I feel strongly about something, I should maybe be a little more, I should have a little more faith in it, and also try to work harder to convince other people.
Yeah, That's really nice. So,
Yeah.
yeah, third one. Like, what's the number one thing that has helped you shorten your learning curve?
Shorten my learning curve. I would say I like to, pay attention to the little details, and
Hmm.
I think that's something many of us just miss out. We're just so focused on the big picture that we miss out on focusing on many tiny teeny details, right?
Hmm.
And every time I take up something new and I want to learn something new, it's focusing on all the little things that helps me move forward faster, right? Most people are
Right.
focusing on the big thing and the main thing, and they leave all the small key related things that are hovering around for our attention, but we just tend to maybe subconsciously just ignore them. So I try to like factor in the little things, pay attention to them, and dive deep into them, and that helps me learn faster.
Totally. And like, according to you, since you have been working again remotely for the longest period I know, what's the one word or one phrase that you would give, like, to remote work life?
I would say creativity, because it makes you very, very, very creative in terms of how you, I would say, design your life, and
Mhm.
how you, work with people who are not physically close to you.
Nice. That's a good perspective. So yeah, thanks a lot, Meera, taking time and coming on the show and talking about this amazing journey of yours, and a lot of insights there for like many, like definitely a lot of companies, managers, and even people who have just started working remotely. I'm sure like this would give them a good perspective and good understanding of like what exactly remote culture or remote life or remote working means.
Right. Thank you so much for having me, and I enjoyed this conversation.